Mr. Coffey has 30 years' experience in guiding adoption of new technologies and practices as a developer, consultant, educator, author, and lecturer, with particular emphasis on software development and information security disciplines. We are fortunate to have Peter present at our conference as he's a keynote at conferences around the world. Today, Peter will share a multinational perspective on the rapid adoption and dramatic impact of new cloud services and tools. Please help me welcome Peter Coffey.
Thank you. Thank you. You folks are always good at keeping me agile, because when I talk to a group pretty much annually, it really does force me to go back and look at what I showed you last year, see if there are any apologies that need to be made, and in particular, try to minimize duplication. So those of you who were with us last year, you might recognize a few of the opening slides because they're pretty much, you know, some similar context, some similar foundation, and those of you who weren't here last year, you won't have seen them before. Those of you who were with me for the ACM and AITP opening a few months ago will also recognize some of this material, but I've made a conscious effort to give you guys some value add today. And so a lot of this material that I'm showing you today has not previously been seen, and thank you for being part of the beta program. The word cloud appears on this slide. Generally, I try to minimize its use because pretty much everyone at this point has made up their mind how they feel about that word. If they get it, they think you're pandering to them if you come out and give them a talk about the cloud that could have been given 10 years ago, the way, you know, a certain yachtsman did at his conference a few weeks ago. And everyone was saying, wait, you know, is there going to be a plot twist here? Or is he really just telling us this as if it were news? No, it's really not news. At the same time, there are people who have made up their mind that they are either unprepared or for regulatory or other reasons incapable of taking advantage of it, and they bristle in annoyance and irritation if they think you're trying to shove this cloud hype down their throats. And therefore, I try not to use the word cloud very much anymore. I try to talk about not cloud, which is the label for the things you wish someone else would do for you, but about social and mobile, which are the things everybody knows they need. But by the time we're done today, I hope that I will have completely changed your concept of what the word social means in a technology context and in particular in a corporate and government context. So let's see if I can accomplish that today. We're a publicly traded company, and every year that safe harbor statement gets a little longer. I think that's in the rules. This is my version of the safe harbor statement, which normally would just say any forward-looking statements, blah, blah, blah. This is my version. I'm not going to make forward-looking statements today. I'm not going to talk about anything that is not actually being done by somebody today. And even if I show some things that are not yet on the market, they are all clearly doable improvements upon things you could be buying right now, practices you could be using right now, things that third graders are using to do collaborative editing with their teachers right now, while businesses talk about adopting collaboration environments sometime in the next 3 years. You've seen charts like this, 150 million conversations a day. Not just Facebook, Twitter, Google+, YouTube, LinkedIn. The volume of interaction, not just between people and people, but between people and processes. The number of automatic updates that you get in the course of a typical week now where a financial service advises you of something, or your travel arrangements push an update to you on your flight. All of these things are obvious, and you'd be entitled to ask, who cares? I mean, yes, fine, back in 2011, social traffic outpaced email traffic. But just as a number, you're perfectly entitled to say, so what? Why do I care about this in any business setting? The answer is this, and some of you have seen this chart from last year, and a small version of it will also be appearing at the bottom center of every slide going forward, just to remind you how important this is. This diagram looks like a map. It was not drawn by a cartographer. Every line that you are seeing there represents Facebook friend pairs between 2 points on the planet. It is a darker line if they're farther apart, because that suggests more effort involved in maintaining that relationship. And it is a darker line if there are more Facebook friend pairs between those two locations. But a very recognizable map of the planet does emerge from that calculation, which was done by a Facebook intern in an afternoon. And even the exceptions have exceptions. For example, China doesn't seem to be there, and yet, can anyone see Beijing? It's that place where all those lines come together. So even in a place like China, which has not, in general, been largely allowed to participate in the 900+ million community of Facebook users, the people you probably most need to know in China are absolutely in that planet. You are looking at what is very literally a map of the marketplace in which you need to be competing for talent, competing for capital, competing for economies and deficiencies of resources, making yourself a profitable company in a world that seems to be screaming toward commoditization. This is how you are going to do this. That's what we're going to spend the rest of today talking about doing. It is not that the web is becoming relatively less important. The web is becoming irrelevant. The web is a content farm for social networks. What we've called the web for all these years is actually becoming the chirping cricket museum of past media practice. Because the actual traffic on the websites of the top 100 Fortune corporations has actually shrunk in the last year, while the activity in their social networking sites has exploded. When people want to discover your brand, they don't go to your website to find out what they need to know. They go to influencers and advisors, some of whom are familiar to you, the product reviewers in the magazines, but some of them are people you've never heard of. And yet a social graph calculation would tell you, these are the people who are actually making governments collapse, bringing global banks to their knees. These are the people whose well-placed messages and the discoverability of those messages are changing that map that we were just looking at. And the result is this. I sometimes encounter people who say, you're asking us to be an innovator, you're asking us to get ahead of our customers, that's not the way we do business here. My answer is, no, I'm not. I'm giving you a chance to catch up. Because in the old world, your customers followed the rules. When someone thought they might be interested in your company, they would ask marketing to send them a brochure. The brochure would completely define what they know about you. After all, what else are they going to do? Call a personal focus group? Not really an option. Your existing customers, your imminent customers, people about to buy from you, well, they're interacting with someone from sales who gives them terms and conditions and gives them an illusion of negotiation. But what are they going to do? Convene a panel of all the other buyers and say, well, what kind of discounts are they offering you? What kind of treatment can I get from them if I use the magic cookie that you used with them? Not an option. And your existing customers, if they're not happy with you, well, they do what they're supposed to do. They go dig the manual out of the kitchen drawer. They look for the 800 number. They call the help desk. And if you promise to get back to them this week, okay, well, what's their alternative? Call a press conference? Welcome to the new world, in which your prospects do not follow the rules. They go out to LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or whatever and say, hey, anyone bought one of these recently? Remember the Consumer Reports problem used to be you'd get a highly rated product and then you'd go to the store. Well, that model hasn't been made for 6 months because that was how long the time lag was, so you're kind of on your own. All you can really do is get a loose idea of the brand. Now I can not only find out what's the model I should be looking for, but oh yeah, make sure you get one with Thailand on the label and not Singapore because the Singapore factory hasn't been turning out good stuff in the last 2 weeks. That's the kind of real-time information that's available to every single customer. As for buyers, buyers can do competitor research in real time, and customers, used to be, if you promised them same-day response, that was pretty good. No one under 25 is impressed by same-day response. They want to know why they can't get a reply within the hour or less. And if they're not happy, Guy Kawasaki, who became best known during his time at Apple, famously turned down the job of being CEO of Yahoo because he thought it would be too long a commute from the north of San Francisco to Palo Alto. Oh well, didn't turn out too well. But he says he wants to own the word enchantment the way Tom Peters owns the word excellence. If your customer is not enchanted in the first moment of interaction with your readiness to assume ownership of the problem and responsibility for satisfaction, they can go out and call that global press conference in 140 characters or less. Tell the whole world on Facebook. Do all of these things simultaneously. And it was a nanny who didn't think that the Bank of America debit card fees were reasonable who wound up turning that into a multinational campaign that eventually forced Bank of America to say, oh, okay, we won't do that. This is how these things get started. So what are the implications for your organization? If every person in your organization may suddenly find themselves pressed into service as an avatar of your brand, they'd all better be equipped with the ability to contact any expert anywhere in your company who can solve that customer's problem. Now think about the silos we've built ourselves over the years. Right now I have a new role at Salesforce.com as CTO for our automotive practice. Because we realized, looking across the company, we've got 80+ customers who either make cars, make parts for cars, sell cars, insure cars, or in some other way are related to that business. And we looked at that industry and said, let's see, you've got the major automakers who spend billions of dollars building interest in their brand with traditional print and TV media campaigns. And if they achieve success, you walk onto the dealer's lot and start the relationship from scratch. They don't know you. They don't know that you've been on the company website every day on your lunch hour, picking out the 4-door crimson red with sport package model of the vehicle. They don't know that you're ready to buy. They just know that you're someone who's walking in for a test drive. That can be fixed. Once you've bought the car, now you've got a service relationship, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years, and you interact with that service advisor maybe twice a year. They know about changes in your lifestyle, new kids, new hobbies, whatever. And when you realize that the 2-door microcar that was meeting your needs as a young single is no longer what you need for your family of 4+ dog, and you walk across the lot to buy the car, does the sales rep know anything about this history that ought to be readily harvestable from these conversations you've had with service for the last 3 years? Today, not so much. This is fixable, but the implication is that you need the power to address issues pushed out to the edge of the organization. You need real-time collaborative access to expertise and content pushed out to the edge of the organization in a way that never made sense before. Today, the cost of a disaffected customer and the impact that they can wreak upon your brand in 24 hours is substantial enough that anyone in the organization should have discretion to spend up to, I don't know, pick your business. It might be $2, it might be $200, depending on the business, in an immediate customer satisfaction measure. A flight attendant should be able to give you a complimentary drink. A service advisor should be able to hand you a coupon for $20 off your next service call if they were an hour late for an appointment, whatever. You need to push that kind of discretion and that kind of responsibility for engagement with the customer out to the edge of the organization. Now, is everyone in your organization capable of doing this? Not necessarily. That means they need to be supported by algorithms and processes and mobile applications, and this is how technology comes into this. You need to equip everybody with the knowledge, and that means the process automation, and that means the real-time data awareness that make it possible for them to have no sparrow fall without being able to do something positive for your brand. Let's talk about an example. Let's talk about financial services. Old world, if you sold the pension managers, the pension fund managers of the top 2,000 companies your package, bing, you were good. You had a business. Anyone remember the movie The Pursuit of Happiness that Will Smith did, where he's working his way up in one of the brokerage firms? They're making their list, and if you're really good, you get to talk to the actual pension fund manager at one of these big companies, and not just an individual investor. Why? Because they represent hundreds and thousands of customers. Today, it's a different model. Everybody's doing defined contribution plans now. Every individual employee is their own retirement planner to an extent they've never been before. You need to serve up content that meets regulatory criteria for accuracy and revealing all the necessary terms, while at the same time being consumable by an elementary school graduate. Wow. There's a challenge. You need to deliver a diversity of content without compromising accuracy, without compromising regulatory compliance, and you need to put it on their smartphone. Tremendous opportunity here to deliver these applications. But here's the interesting thing. No one enjoys access to any data that's not available to everybody. I mean, except for various SEC violating practices of insider trading, everybody's got access to the same stuff. So when I'm doing business in a typical week, as I am, with broker A, broker B, and broker C, the fact that broker C has a retirement planning tool that in 15 seconds runs a Monte Carlo simulation of the next 30 years of market behavior and tells me if I've got more than a 5% chance of running out of money before I die, that's a very useful thing. The other two don't have that, and so I'm going to view that as a differentiator, and that's probably going to get them trading business from me that the other two will not get. The other two will compete on different criteria. That's the question. How do you get away from thinking that your product is what you do and put yourself in the mind of a customer and say, the product is the benefit that I get? I was dealing with someone in agribusiness a few weeks ago, and I said, you think your product is bags of fertilizer. Is there anything less is there anything in the world more commoditizable than a bag of ammonium nitrate with a label on the bag? No, I'm sorry, there's not. Good luck getting a profit margin out of fertilizer. Now let's talk about what your customer is actually buying. Your customer is actually buying increased profit per acre. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, this is a much more interesting conversation to have, because now the fertilizer is just the foot in the door of that relationship. I can sell micro-targeted weather forecasting wrapped around that bag of fertilizer. Do I need to hire meteorologists to do that? No. I need to hire someone who can do a mashup off the NOAA website and target it to the customer's zip code, because of course I have the customer's zip code. I know what crops the customer is growing. I can take that process and wrap it around my bag of fertilizer. And now I've got a differentiated service with some hope of profitability. And that's where we're going to go. You're going to differentiate with the content, the planning aids, the data feeds, the trading tools. You're going to differentiate with the services that you can wrap around what you used to think was the product that you sold. And this affects every industry. How do we take industries that are regarded as archetypes of brokenness and fix them? How do we take healthcare and fix it? You don't give the doctors iPads. That automates the brokenness. You don't do that. What is the fundamental cost problem in healthcare today? Too many people coming to offices for expensive tests that most of the time return a result that says, congratulations, you didn't need to come in today. That's what healthcare does, and that's why it's not going to work as people like me get older but don't want to admit it. That's what's going to be happening. So how are we going to fix that? Well, you fix it by saying, wait a minute, we live in a world where sensors are practically free, processors are practically free, bandwidth is practically infinite. Why doesn't my toilet tell my doctor that my urine pH changed this morning? It doesn't need to have a multi-million-dollar analyzer that runs a full battery of tests. It just needs to say, this is interesting. He's been putting out at a steady 6.8 for the last couple of weeks, and all of a sudden it's gotten a little more acidic. We should talk to him about this. This can be done. A 50-cent cap on a pill bottle can tell your doctor you're not taking your meds on a regular schedule. That's something that requires intervention. But if I'm taking my meds, and if I'm eating regularly, which a sensor in my kitchen can tell just from when I open and close the refrigerator door, and if the toilet says that what's coming out is not changing, why does he need to talk to me any more than twice a year? This is how you solve the problem, by reinventing what it is that you're selling. You're not selling procedures, you're selling wellness. Same thing for education. Why is higher education unsustainable today? Because we've got multi-million-dollar recreational, social, and residential campuses that happen to include a few classrooms here and there. Most of the cost of a four-year college degree does not go into delivering educational content in the classroom or the lab. It does not. And you don't solve that problem by replacing the textbooks with iPads. I don't have a problem with iPads. They're great tools. But they don't change processes unless you make a commitment to changing the process. Just introducing the technology does not change the process. So how do we solve the education problem? Well, let's see. Right now at MIT, the peak time for consuming the content of the lectures in the primary core electrical engineering subject is 2 a.m. That is not when the professor is in the classroom. That is when the video is available. Or rather, the video is available all the time. That's when the video, that's the #1 time of day from when that video is being consumed. And here's the really cool thing. Every 6 minutes or so, a question can pop up on the screen with a very simple ABC answer. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about, are you getting this? Are you following this? Do you understand the point that was just made? What was the point that was just made? And so when the students meet in their small group the next day, the TA has a dashboard that says, okay, out of the 10 topics that were covered in yesterday's lecture, 8 of them are fully understood by everyone in this room. Let's just talk about these 2. So when anyone says, oh no, online education, that just can't replace teacher interaction with the student. No, it can't. It can permit teacher interaction with the student. It can strengthen and focus the teacher interaction because now you're not wasting time due to lack of information on what they actually understand. Now let's even talk about getting out of the classroom. Let's talk about internships being the norm instead of the exception. How about having students spending most of their time outside the traditional campus environment in an apprenticeship or internship type situation? Because after all, their curriculum, the sequence of presentation of material, that can now be completely customized. You can say, what are you doing tomorrow? Okay, fine, skip ahead 3 chapters, read this for tomorrow. And there's no reason why that interaction can't be made scalable and highly automatable with the same kind of techniques that are used to have Amazon push recommendations to you or Facebook put stories at the top of your feed. So if you're an IT person, what does this concept of social interaction really mean? It does not mean that you're responsible for weaning people off email and putting them on a social tool in the workplace, because that's not changing your process. That's just changing the mechanism. It means you're going to be changing your emphasis of what do you spend your time doing. You are going to be not allocating scarcity. There is no scarcity. Memorize this. There is no such thing at this point as scarcity of IT resources. Everyone here been to Disneyland? Okay, you've driven on the Autopia, right? Little car, little engine. The only way to have any fun with it at all is to put your foot down all the way to the floor and try to pretend you're driving fast enough that it's a challenge, right? This is the way we've done IT capacity planning for 40 years. You have an annual conversation about how big a motor can you get this year, and then once you've got it, my gosh, you put your foot down and you get the most work out of it you can because you're not going to get anything else that year. We're in a new model now. If you want 10,000 servers for the next 10 hours, you can have them. You'd better have a good business case. But if you've got a good business case, it would be a crime not to take advantage of that capacity. If you're going to put out a Super Bowl ad, for heaven's sake, is it possibly defensible that you would not have enough capacity on hand to handle as many web inquiries as you get in the next 90 seconds after that Super Bowl ad hits? Of course you want to do that. So what this means is that you are going to evolve from being a pyramid builder who draws a plan and says, great, bring in the slave labor, and spends 3 years stacking up the blocks and hoping that the Pharaoh likes the result when you're done, to being an air traffic controller. Because you are going to be making decisions now on a time scale of, days or hours, not years or quarters. And you are going to be, I hope, in contact with the business unit and saying, what do you need tomorrow from 9 to 11 in the afternoon, 9 to 11 in the morning? What do you need? You doing anything special? Anything important that I ought to be prepared to gear up for you? This is going to make the process of being an IT manager way more exciting. So if you got into this business because you didn't like excitement, I have bad news. And if you got into this business because you just didn't like dealing with people, I've got way worse news. Most of your value to your business for the rest of your career is how well can you anticipate people's desires and intentions and have the resources in place in a constantly changing, dynamically provisioned manner so that you do that better than anybody else. Woohoo. This is your new job. When you can have essentially unlimited power, essentially instantaneously, as long as you've got a business case that pays for it on an hour-by-hour basis, how many more decisions do you need to make? Start thinking about it now. Then what about your role as a controller? Used to be, you were Dr. No. You bought the stuff and you owned the access to it and you had people like IBM. Doesn't Omegamon sound like something out of a Transformers movie? That's an actual product name. Isn't that cool? A comprehensive performance and availability solution for monitoring, analyzing, and managing mainframe environments. They still sell a lot of mainframes. Does anyone think that's where the innovation is taking place anymore? CMOs will outspend CIOs on technology by 2016, per Forrester. Forrester is pretty smart. They usually get these things right. Your new role is to contain the chaos. IT is no longer going to be the department of make it work. It's going to be the department of keep it from getting us put in jail. IT is now going to have to be the adult supervision. Absent an IT department that is credible and authoritative in areas of compliance, governance, and security, your employees will get put in jail or put out of business because they can, because they can go out and use some completely unsecure service because you wouldn't give them something that was secure. And they'll wind up with critical data being disclosed that either destroys intellectual property or compromises customer confidence. You can't prevent them from doing this. You can only make them not want to by offering better guidance, better support. You need to compete for their attention. This is the way it's going to be from now on. That's a car dashboard. Everyone knows what a car dashboard is. It's got instruments and it's got, you know, a couple of knobs and buttons and things. And that's absolutely not what it's going to be going forward. This is a concept that was done by Bertone, if I remember correctly. First of all the displays are soft. Actually, the newest Cadillac has this already. You can reconfigure the dashboard layout because it's just a piece of glass. And you can have different dashboard layouts based on personal preference. But think about the two fundamental differences, the fundamental difference between the two ways you drive. Much of the time, you're alone in the car, and you want to minimize driver distraction. The rest of the time, you've got someone in the right front seat of the car, and you want to maximize passenger distraction. So this is the difference between a dashboard for the single driver mode that says, yes, there's an Italian restaurant 2 exits ahead, and the driver with accompanying passenger mode that says, oh, there are 5 Italian restaurants in the next half hour, and here's the full Zagat survey on all of them. Well, in a completely soft environment, you can deliver information in these two modes. And those of you who are with me in LA, pretend you've never heard this thought puzzle before, but why is Google interested in building autonomous cars? Google sells advertising. What is the world's biggest untapped resource of potential attention spent consuming advertising? People stuck in their cars. The less attention you have to devote to driving, the more attention you can devote to precisely target ads based on where you are, where you're going, what your calendar says you're going to do when you get there. All of this is just ripe for the taking. Now here's the other thing. What's that down there at the bottom right? Oh my gosh, is that a slot in the dashboard for an iPad? Think about the balance of power in the in-car environment. There were radios in cars a decade before there were radios in pockets. There were phones in cars 2 decades before there were phones in pockets. And today, the turn-by-turn directions on a handheld device are probably at least as good as those that you would spend literally 10 times as much to have built into your car. Does anyone think that the dealer-installed or factory-installed nav system is going to be with us as an important feature in vehicles 10 years from now? I think it's on the cusp of becoming an anachronism. The new in-car environment is going to say, okay, here's your smartphone, I'm docked with it wirelessly, or here's your tablet, you've slid it into a slot. Here are the apps you use. Here is the data that you want to be aware of. I'm going to render that up now in an in-car appropriate manner. There's an opportunity for redefining the user experience, if you will, of being in a car in a way that takes advantage of all the work that we're doing with the handhelds and the portable devices, but makes it appropriate to the in-car environment. So there's a lot of work to do in terms of the technology to make this continue to meet automobile standards of vibration-proof, weather-proof, last for 10 years, but now it's got to be upgradable. Now it's got to be extensible. That was never really an issue before. It's going to change the balance of power in the entire industry. And it's not just that. Tablet, unfortunately, has come to mean something about the size of an iPad. And that's a really bad identification. Paul Graham wrote a brilliant essay, which is out there, the footnote's up there. By the way, these slides will be up on SlideShare like really soon, so all of this stuff is going to be available to you. But Paul Graham's got a great essay out there titled Tablets, where he says, you know, the problem is we had the iPhone first. And so we think that's a smartphone, and we think the iPad is you know, something different. He says, you've got to think generally here. Every surface with which you interact can deliver you information or intermediate function for you. And Corning, rather than Microsoft or Apple, actually has the best visualization of this. If you Google Corning Day Glass video, you'll see not one but 2 videos they've done titled A Day Made of Glass, Part 1 and Part 2, that talk about what your environment could be when every flat surface can deliver information or mediate function. Now, some people find this a very overwhelming prospect. Sorry. The opportunities that this represents for collaboration, for education, for healthcare, for all the things that we do are just too fascinating to pass up. And Paul said the right thing about the iPhone. It's not a phone. It replaces your phone. You don't buy iPhones because they're great phones. I carry a great phone. It's a Samsung, contractor model that you could drive a truck over and it would still work. You might think this makes me a dinosaur, but my 22-year-old son has the exact same phone. Why? Because he's a backpacker and an extreme sports fan. That's what he wants, a phone that's not going to be broken if it gets looked at the wrong way. But what is your smartphone today? How quickly did we get to the point where we can practically assume that almost anyone over the age of 10 is carrying a wirelessly connected representation of identity, location, and activity? Voluntarily. Orwell couldn't begin to imagine this one. Forget the telescreen. This is one you carry with you. And it's astonishing what you can do with these things. Continental Bank in Australia has an app that lets you hold up the phone, take a picture of a house, and immediately get the loan approval, because they've already got all the other information they need on you. And by looking, they know where the phone is, and from the picture of the house, they know exactly which property you're talking about, and they are doing handheld loan approvals. This is real. This is not a forward-looking statement. This app is in production in Australia today. Mobile does not mean it's small and light enough to be carried. And anyone who thinks this is just about miniaturization is completely missing the point. Putting a handle on a 30-pound PC used to allow you to call it portable. I know, I carried one once.
30-pound cell phone.
Well, yeah, cell phones used to be called bricks too. Absolutely. Now, mobile devices know where you are. They know by measuring acceleration velocity if you're likely to be driving or not. The good ones have a way of checking your calendar and having some sense of what activities you're involved in. My idea for the use case of the connected car is, how many of us have been in the situation where we're trying to meet some people at a restaurant? Normally it's 10 minutes away. We know that with the traffic it's going to be 30. We're nervous, we're fussing, we're wondering what's going to happen next. Wouldn't it be cool if the car could push you an alert saying, hey, don't worry. Number one, the table's going to be 15 minutes late. And number two, no one else is going to be there any earlier than you are. It can do that proactively. And if you think that that's a futuristic scenario, wait until you're on a Virgin flight next year. When you sit down and there's this bigger screen in front of you, it's a little bit bigger than you would normally need to watch movies. And the next thing you know, the screen greets you by name. It knows what connecting flights you're worried about making. It knows the status of your frequent flyer program and whether you're entitled to a complimentary drink. It knows what your preferences in movies and drinks are. And if your flight is delayed, it proactively tells you, don't worry, the staff at the airport where you're connecting are aware that you have a tight connection to make, and they will be waiting to escort you to the gate. Relax and have a drink. This is going to be in your Virgin flights next year. Now, if you're a little weirded out by the idea of them knowing this much about you, fine, don't do it. Don't do it. The fact is, most people, as soon as they're offered this kind of value, become amazingly tolerant of what they would in the abstract consider terrible infringements of their privacy. As soon as people are getting actual benefit, as soon as they're getting concierge level attention from these things, it becomes a completely different thing. Now, I hope I'm making it clear. This is not about a better, faster, cheaper smartphone. This is about an environment in which the data that is needed to make your life work better knows where you are and finds its way to you in a way that interacts with other resources like your calendar and your friends and coworkers' calendars and the state of the tables at the restaurants and so on, and the waiting times at your doctor's office and that kind of thing. And you start doing the storyboards here. Just imagine how much better your life could be with this kind of pervasive networking. The tablet revolution, in short, is underhyped. Apple just announced last week they've sold 100 million iPads in whatever it is, 2 years. I was just driving in the Detroit area a week ago to visit my son's wife's parents. I was thinking, why do I remember having to look at handwritten instructions to get to this house last time? Because now I'm just glancing down at my iPad and it's just showing me which way I'm going and even showing me traffic information. Oh, that's right. That was 4 years ago. There were no iPads. It's only been 2 years. They've kind of taken over quickly, haven't they? And if you rethink your customer now, not as merely the buyer of your product, but in terms of what do they drive, what do they do, how do they live, who are their friends, what advisors do they trust, a lot of possibilities for delivering value become apparent. And that's what it's about. This isn't about exploiting people. This isn't about snooping on people. This isn't about data mining or invading people's privacy. This is about reaching out to people and saying, hey, if you'll share this information with me, I can do X, Y, and Z for you and make your life a whole lot better. That's a fair exchange. And people respond very positively to that. And that is why McKinsey is saying there's $1.3 trillion in value waiting to be unlocked through social technologies. Notice they didn't say social networks. This is not about Facebook finding a better way to do promoted stories and making more money off of mobile devices. Yes, they need to do that, but that's not the point. That's the toe of the giant here. This is the interesting part. What is social? Social is not people talking to people. Social is not people sharing pictures of their pets and their kids. Social is a set of behaviors. And when someone tries to marginalize the importance of this word in a business setting, say, look, the opposite of social is not professional. The opposite of social is not serious. Does everyone know what the opposite of social is? It's very simple. The opposite of social is antisocial. There is no context in which the adjective antisocial has any positive meaning. None. And yet we have 30 or 40 years experience in building profoundly antisocial technology. We're good at this. We build things that behave like a person in an office with a closed door and a do not disturb sign on the knob. And if you knock timidly on the door, an angry voice says, what do you want? And you open the door and ask a question, it gives you the answer. It gives you the answer. There's only one answer. It has nothing to do with the fact that you've asked the same question for the last week, every day. It has nothing to do with the other questions you've been asking that might suggest a context for the answer. It's profoundly antisocial behavior. Social is a set of algorithms that says, I've been paying attention to your recent behavior, therefore I have some idea of what you mean by your current request and how I can make it better tailored to what you need. I know what your context is. The mobile user wants a different kind of answer than the user sitting at the Master of the Universe desktop setup with 3 big screens. They're just different kinds of information that are useful. So context matters. Past history matters. Awareness of real-time events matters. Put that in algorithms, put that in processes, equip that with appropriate sensors and data feeds. Now you've got an opportunity to be different, to be special. And so being able to bubble up these social behaviors into your cloud applications is key. This is the difference between an infrastructure type cloud that just takes your existing difficult, cumbersome processes and moves them into a virtualized environment, and something that's an actual cloud platform that lets you orchestrate these things in meaningful ways. I'm going to share a few more examples of that later. So how far can this go? Well, how about jet engines tweeting? How about the jet engines on the new GE Gen X engines that are on the new Boeing Dreamliner class and 747-800 aircraft, providing real-time telemetry feeds, and we're talking about order of a terabyte per hour, that are readily consumable by the engineering teams on the ground, so that when the plane lands, they have some idea of whether it's going to need any special attention. Now, I want you to think about the implications here. If you've got 100,000 vehicles that are all providing real-time telemetry to you, you can become aware of statistically meaningful behavior a whole lot sooner than if you just got one driver talking to their mechanic about it. And so now possible problems that could turn into very expensive recalls can now be detected much earlier, and your ability to follow up on whether that work got done is considerably improved. Think about this being applied across every category of product that's complicated enough that service and safety are issues. The data is out there just waiting to be exploited. So if you think about the opportunities involved in a public social network in which people are already participating on a massive scale, they're already demonstrating they want to interact this way. They want to spend time finding networks of trust and influence, finding ways to get better information. Equip an internal network to meet that need. Equip your people internally and equip your internal processes with the kind of intelligence and context awareness and responsiveness to meet that rising expectation. And then embed that in your products. So now your products become actual avatars of your brand. What's a soda machine? What does Coca-Cola sell? Coca-Cola's product might look to you like flavored, sweetened, carbonated water. right? I mean, that's what a Coke is, right? And all the other Coke brands. Anyone seen or heard of a Coke Freestyle machine? Yeah. I think it's 14 different flavor essences. Make up your own custom combination, give it a name. It gives you a QR code that you can tweet to your friends. Then they can show that QR code to another Freestyle machine and try the mix that you've just come up with. You get Coke loyalty points because your friends are trying your mix. Ooh. Do you know how the world's most liked business site on Facebook is Coca-Cola? It is an enormous loyalty points program. Why? Because ultimately, what is the difference between having a Coke and having a store brand cola? It's your identification with one of the world's best known brands and a community of shared experience wrapped around that brand. And this is why they are able to command the kind of prices that they are in the market. This is why an Apple is able to command the kind of gross margins it does in the market. This is why a BMW is able to command margins, because they have lifted the definition of their product above what it does to the community of which you become a member by owning and using it. And there is, I mean, if we can do this with a bag of fertilizer, I think we can do this with what you do. And we can measure this. We've had enough companies trying this for the last 2 years now that we're able to quantify this. Sales productivity up 32%, customer satisfaction up 34%, sales campaign effectiveness because you're now targeting people based on what they actually want to know more about because you have these cues now available to you. Employees are more productive and not unrelatedly more satisfied, and the innovation feedback loop with your customers is incredible. Absolutely astonishing, because what is the algorithm here? The ignored customer with even the slightest dissatisfaction can be a noisy critic, and thanks to social networks can be in fact a globally heard voice of criticism. The moment that you tweet back or Facebook back and they realize you're actually paying attention, that diffuse and very damaging criticism suddenly turns into very specific advice. Incredibly valuable advice. And the moment that you start acknowledging the value of that advice by declaring them an MVP customer or whatever, oh please, now they are passionate advocates for your brand. They will go to bat for you. You make a little mistake, the next thing you know you've got 100 people out there tweeting saying, no, don't beat them up. They know about it, they're working on it. You can't buy that, but you can invite it. You can earn it. So, what are IT skills going forward? It's not about buying and tuning hardware anymore. I promise you, we and Amazon and Google and Microsoft and Hewlett-Packard and Fujitsu and IBM are not going to leave a lot of that business on the table. We do this full-time. We do it with incredible efficiency. Tuning database index structures used to be a monetizable skill set. I'm sorry. This is what people are saying they want. They want people who can think about orchestrating services and continually looking for ways to add value in the business in their IT shops. These are the skills they want to hire. Everything else they want to farm out to services. And in particular, they want the CIO to be a business innovator. This is a new thing. CIOs now report that they view their current job as a pathway to the CEO position at a rate that's 3 to 4 times what that self-assessment of their future career potential was 5 or 6 years ago. This is good news. I continually run into people who seem to think that increased emphasis on cloud services diminishes the role of the CIO. That is not merely wrong, it is the actual opposite of right. The possibility of now being at the head table talking about the future of the industry and the future of the business and the strategy not merely for success, but for superior leadership in your industry that you can have as someone who understands the opportunities of this technology, understands how many of the past perceived limits no longer apply, understands the interaction between people's demonstrated desire for this kind of interaction, and the ability to enable that through proper thinking about what an application is, what a product is, what a brand is. That's enormous. I can't think of a more exciting time to be involved in this industry. It can't happen without trust. You cannot do this if there is not an absolutely high level, a consistently high level of trust, and that's why it's really important to be able to talk about security. You're the Department of Adult Supervision now. That's not documentation, that's the user interface for controlling security in our platform, Enforce.com, where instead of having to read code to decide if something is secure, you're checking boxes. You're saying, look, this is a multi-tenant system. I want this particular constellation of user privilege to include the ability to read this, change this, and create and destroy this. Fine, done. Because that's the way security works in systems that are architected from the bottom up to share. If you don't want your administrator to be able to read stuff, but do want them to be able to delete obsolete stuff, fine. You have that control. And if you're not happy with that, there's a growing ecosystem of things like CipherCloud that will let you implement a layer of encryption between you and the cloud. So you can say, yeah, this stuff here, this is personal information. We don't actually want to store that in an external cloud because we just don't want to have that conversation with our customers. So anytime that the application asks for a social security number, send it this cryptographically hashed version of the social security number. You don't have to rewrite the app. The app thinks it's getting an SSN. It gets something that looks to it like an SSN. Only you know that what it's gotten is a cryptographically masked version of something with the same format as an SSN. You don't have to write any code at your end, and you don't have to rewrite any code at the other end. You just drop in the abstraction layer, set up the policies, and go forward. This is a highly credible, very straightforward way of doing this kind of thing. And so anyone who says, oh, these shared systems are inherently less secure, again, they're not merely wrong, they're 180 degrees opposite from right. When you've got people sharing this stuff, the problems get found, the problems get fixed, and they get fixed for everybody at the same time. Forrester, in fact, got particularly angry with the Yachtsman when he was talking about virtual machines being safer, and put out a very strongly worded statement recently saying, this multi-tenant stuff that's the foundation of cloud economy, it is actually more secure than what most people are using now. And it's all about telling your customers exactly what's going on. I could take 15 minutes and talk about that. I don't have it, so I'm not going to. Governance, you don't want to be doing this yourself. You want to be outsourcing responsibility for this stuff because the number of different rules in various jurisdictions continues to increase. The volatility of case law in this area is considerable. Believe me, you really, really want to have this in the hands of professionals. Saying, well, we just feel better doing it ourselves is exactly like having a bunch of pickup trucks down in the company garage and saying, well, we do our deliveries ourselves. We just don't think these UPS and FedEx guys are up to our standard. I'm sorry. Yes, they are. And using external services for your IT security today is not merely defensible, it's arguably best practice. Availability, only a non-engineer would have put out this chart to tell our customers how secure we are, how high availability we have, because you can't see it, but this is 99.3%, and this is 99.9%, and that's 100%. And so on this chart, the distance from 99.9 to 100 looks exactly the same as the distance from 99.3 to 99.4. And we all know that the value of getting from 99.9 to 100 is considerably greater than the value of getting from 99.3 to 99.4. So since I actually do understand logarithms, this is my version of that chart, in which you have 2 nines is 0, because that's really not going to impress anybody. 3 nines is 1, 4 nines is 2, 5 nines is 3. And you can see that what we're doing is continually, if I were to extrapolate that out, you'd see it's up there about their sum now. 4 nines is no longer particularly impressive. It's enormously impressive for most on-premise facilities. It is barely table stakes if you're us or Amazon or any of the other big clouds. We know we have to be approximately 100 times better before we're perceived as being as good. Okay, it's a cross we have to bear. I'm not going to talk anymore about security. I'm going to talk about you. What are you going to be doing now that you didn't do before? First of all, you're going to spend a lot more time talking about trust. Trust is not security. Security means only authorized people get to look at it. Trust is when I'm sure that I know who's authorized. When I know that I have some appropriate control of who's being allowed to see it. That's privacy, which is a very different thing from security. And IT departments need to be the credible departments of trust, the custodians of trust in brand, in data, in financial integrity. That's it. This is you. Governance related. Especially as you all become global. I hope you're all becoming global. And you have to deal with jurisdictions that all think they have the world's best way to define compliance. Mobility. It is not about bring your own device, although you have to be able to deal with that. It is about How can we get 4 units of revenue out of 3 units of resource by taking advantage of mobility? How can, if your basic unit of revenue generation is 2 guys in a van driving around town calibrating medical devices, how can you be using proactive awareness of preventive maintenance needs, real-time monitoring of traffic conditions, and other things to increase dramatically the productivity of what you do? That's what mobility should really be about. Don't think of it as convenience. Think of it as competitive superiority. Think about it as the way to do more with less. Social interaction, the external communities that are looking to you to be a leader of a conversation, and the internal collaboration that you have to be delivering to make that sustainable in the outside world. If you're trying to handle tweets one at a time, it's probably not going to be scalable. I think some of you were with me last year when I talked about President Obama's Twitter town hall. Roughly 20,000 tweets were analyzed during that less than 1 hour period to be distilled into roughly 20 that would be chosen as representative of the pool for actual interaction. 2 of our guys were sitting in the front row using our Radian 6 tool to analyze that stuff and then present the White House later with a 30-page report saying, hey, here are what the questions were by demographic group, by region of the country, by education level. It turns what would otherwise just be an undifferentiated flood of minutia into actionable insight, into something that can guide policy in a very substantial and meaningful way. And finally, where the heck do you think you're going to get the people to do this? My goodness. You need people who understand technology in a very deep way. They need to understand why LTE changes the rules on bandwidth. Our own CEO said the other day, we put the latest Wi-Fi infrastructure into our new 50 Fremont Street office, and now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know why we did, because LTE is faster. Who would have thought? Wi-Fi routers are now legacy infrastructure. My goodness. Where are you going to deal with this gap? You've got the Financial Times over in the UK observing that we have 5 unemployed people for every job in the US, and yet there are 3 million jobs in the US that we can't fill because we can't find the people with the skills. What is your plan? What is your plan? What is your company's plan? Are you cross-training? Are you looking for business people who've already shown some evidence of technical aptitude and cross-training them? Are you thinking about your IT department not as a group of people who all sit in one place, but as a group of people who get together for lunch once a week, but actually report to a business unit? There are ways to do this. Doing what we've done is not going to be among them. It's not going to be among the successful strategies. It's not going to happen. You're not seeing the enrollment you need in the computer science and technology programs. You're not seeing people show the right level of interest in learning programming as a discipline. We've got to find another way to solve this problem. Finally, there are people who say, I've heard about this cloud thing, it's just the web with a different word wrapped around it. I want to show you an actual example of what I think is the difference between the web and the cloud. A few years ago, I wanted a spreadsheet to track the value of the significant fraction of my compensation that is not in cash, but is in stock, in a very volatile and heavily traded stock. So you might understand that I've got a certain interest in real-time awareness of that situation. And I tried to do this in Excel. Now in Excel, you can tell it you want to construct a data query that involves a connection that lets you plug in a URL for a website to which it will go and find a table structure, which it will then grab and paste into your spreadsheet at an appropriate point. This takes several minutes and a certain programmer orientation to do at all. And here's something really interesting. Why does this say open at 149.8, but up here it says open on 28 May? Well, because the way that table was formatted when I first constructed that query, that was a date, and so I formatted the cell in the spreadsheet as a date, and now any number that gets plugged in there gets interpreted as a date. Ugh. But that's the web, on which it's out there, and you can find it, and you can connect to it, but it's completely up to you to maintain the validity of those connections and to understand their semantic content and to know what they, why they're important and to keep track of the changing state. It's a very brittle system. It's very cool. It's amazingly powerful. I could not have done this at all 10 years ago. 5 years ago I could do this, but now I can do this. For those of you in the back row, each of those is a stock ticker symbol, and over there is the formula Google Finance per N. D2, which is the ticker symbol, and price, which is the attribute I want for it to go extract in real time associated with that ticker symbol. And so now with considerably less effort, without 1/10 of the effort that it used to take to track one thing, I can track, what is that, 14 things. Why is this different? It's different because the data resides in the same place that I'm doing the computation, because I'm dealing with the name of what something is the meaning of what it is. This is what things like XML allow us to do, is say, go get me the price of that thing, not go get me the things that are in this place on the screen. It's allowing us to deal with meaning instead of with mechanism. It is about being able to think about the thing you're trying to get done, not the thing you're trying to make the machine do. Big, big difference. So, this cloud thing, let's not talk about the cloud any more than necessary. Let's talk about what we want. We want on-spec, on-time, on-budget deployment from now on as the norm for every significant IT initiative. Ooh, there's a bold statement. Why not? Why can't that be the norm? In cloud deployments and organizations that have done this once or twice already, that's the new normal. It happens on time, it does what it's supposed to do, and it costs what you said it was going to cost because you have a contract that says this is what you're going to pay. You don't have a contract with the machines in your data center. They do what they do. Every first Tuesday of the month or whatever it is, you find out what it's going to cost you to keep them working. And that's just for the green label stuff. Then every quarter you get to find out what it's going to cost to keep the red label stuff happy. And you can't predict it, and so you can't budget it. Cloud services are business services, and they come with contracted prices. That's a new model. Applications that are readily configurable without impeding upgrade behavior. Security, that's not your problem anymore. You're paying someone for security. Yes, of course you're going to do your due diligence. You're going to check that they've got ISO 27001. You're going to check that they're PCI compliant. You're going to check that they've got FISMA approvals. But these are all well-established frameworks for assessment. And you're going to anticipate not 3-year delays between major upgrades and when you can actually deploy them. I actually had the CIO of Kimberly-Clark, who has now moved over to HP, talking at our event in London in May, and he mentioned in passing that during the coming Memorial Day weekend, they were going to be upgrading to the latest release of SAP ERP. And we were talking about this because we mainly wanted to talk about how cloud services add value to your legacy systems. They don't require you to replace them. They allow you to improve them. But a little bell went off my head and said, why does that sound so odd? And I remembered, and I went and checked my notes and confirmed. SAP ERP 6 came on the market 3 years ago. And it moved the database representation to Unicode so that they could internationalize the content. This has the side effect of roughly doubling the size of all the databases, which if you're Kimberly-Clark and it's your ERP system is probably terabytes to 2x terabytes. That's your problem. You've got to go buy the hardware. Any customizations that have to be rewritten for the new release, well, that's your problem. There's no wonder that it took them 3 years of deep breathing and stretching exercises before they were ready to bite down hard and blow the Memorial Day weekend rolling this thing out. And yet during those 3 years, our customers at least got 9 upgrades. They didn't have to buy new hardware to use them. They didn't have to rewrite any of their customizations to use them. And that's us, and that's Google, and that's Amazon, and that's any of the major cloud providers. It's just getting better all the time. And there's no reason why that shouldn't be your expectation. There's no reason why that shouldn't be the normal way of providing IT function. So finally, William Gibson famously said, future's already here, it's just very unevenly distributed. When I'm one-on-one with any given customer, I can look them in the eye and say, I want you to be the beneficiary of unfair distribution. I want you to have more than your fair share of this future that's deliverable right now. Unfortunately, some of you may compete against each other, so I'm not sure who to look at right now. But essentially, I want every single one of you to say, none of this stuff is forward-looking statements. I could begin doing any of this tomorrow afternoon if I'm not, fixated on the idea of being in church, or Monday morning if I want to allow my Sabbath to go by in good order. You can do this. And we had a great table discussion led by I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Scott. Well, Scott led a great table discussion today on the cloud that was not about what can it do. The title of the discussion was Organizational Readiness for Cloud Adoption. Are you ready to stop leading the charge of the light brigade and congratulating yourself on how many men are following you? Because that's not actually a very good definition of success. Are you prepared to start having conversations about this is how our business will become irrelevant due to fundamental structural change in our industry if we don't take a leadership role in redefining the value we bring to our customers? Are you ready to do that? It requires more command of deep and rapidly changing technology than you have needed to have before. It takes 5 months to bring a new mobile device to the market today because of Qualcomm chipsets and Android flavors. 5 months. That compares with about a 10-year cycle of replacement of desktop PC clients. Windows XP was running 51% of the world's PCs on its 10th birthday. 51%. $12 billion spent to write Vista and Windows 7, and they hadn't even managed to take over half the market. And now they're coming out with Windows 8. SharePoint? SharePoint 2010 has been adopted by well under half of the SharePoint installed base, the others being still on SharePoint 2007, and yet SharePoint partners are warning customers to maybe soft pedal any further customization on the 2010 product because the 2013 product is going to be making so many changes. This is not a slam at the technology. Lots of our customers are getting a lot of value from SharePoint, but the fundamental model makes it difficult to stay abreast of the new capabilities. And so what we say to them is, fine, don't replace what you've got that's working, but use cloud services to add value to it. Use cloud services to get the information out there on the handhelds and interact with your customers so that SharePoint resource now becomes 5 times as valuable to you as it was, or the SAP ERP resource, or the Oracle Financials resource. All of these have latent value that's just waiting to be liberated by taking advantage of the possibilities we've discussed here and by taking advantage of customers' demonstrated desire for you to do more for them. So, thank you for your time.